Hi YouTube, welcome back to another video from Wtf Rc Cars. So, as you've seen on my little SCX24, if you've been following the channel for a while, I use one of the DM racing receivers, and as of the latest update for V3 firmware on the Noble Pro, if you try and bind to your receiver, you do get a warning telling you that it's not an authorized device, and for security reasons it kills the transmission. Now, I do get why Flysky are doing this. At the end of the day, it costs a lot of money to make these controllers and design them. It costs a lot of money to make the receivers, and if DM Racing have just ripped it off and started selling their own receivers, potentially Flysky are losing a lot of sales. You've also got whether it's legal or not, and if a company's making these receivers and just blatantly ripping off other companies' technology, then you have to question whether they're actually past any regulations for interference or whether they're actually safe to use. Totally different part of the argument, but I do get why Flysky want you to use official Flysky receivers. It's the only way they can guarantee that the functionality and the safety is what they've designed. That said, although Flysky do micro receivers, they don't do receivers with built-in ESCs for the Noble Pro, for the micros and everything. So I kind of get why you guys would be annoyed with this, or whether it's something that is going to be a problem. So let's bring you in for a close-up look, and we'll show you what happens when you bind it. We'll try and update it, and then I'll try and find a fix for you. Right, so this is one of the DM Racing receivers. It's one with a built-in ESC. So let's see what happens if we try and put it into bind mode after the update. So if we look in the radio, we've got channel numbers set to 4. And this is the settings that previously worked. So we go to bind set, classic bind. So if we press and hold the bind button down, and then we try and power it up,
binding successful.
We see it bind successfully. But then we get an instant warning. It's been detected that this receiver is an authorized device. Risk of security risk, system has been disabled. So even though it's bound, it won't do anything.
Shutting down.
And if we turn it off, turn it back on,
Welcome to Noble.
you see it binds, but then it instantly disables the device. And if we power it off and back on, get nothing. So one thing that we can try on this one, and I left this lead in case I needed to update it again. So on these, if you put the signal pin of channel 4 to the bind plug, it should power on in update mode. So let's see if we can update this. So it's now in update mode instead of bind mode, and we usually update these as FGR4P and S. So it is accepting the update. So then if we power it off, power it back up with bind button held down, let's see if this makes any difference to it. So bind as classic.
Binding successful.
Nope. So even though it's updated it, it's still detecting this as an unauthorized device. So because the actual transmitter is now detecting that it's a non-authorized receiver, kind of got me thinking. So the only way it knows it's a non-authorized receiver is by the response it gets back. So if we go into his model, we go into his radio frequency setup, we change it to one way, so it's effectively getting no response from the receiver itself. Then we go into his RX menu, bind set, set it to bind as a classic. This is easier said than done with this tiny little button, and I'm sat behind camera. So if we get it into one-way bind and then back out, because you don't get the confirmation of the bind, we now have a fully working DM Racing receiver. So let's see what happens if we then power off.
Shutting down.
Then we power back up. So that works. And if we power the RC off and back up. So yeah, it is a good workaround for it. You would lose the option of being able to use telemetry, so you don't get the RX icon or anything, but you do get all the functionality of the new firmware with Flysky receivers. And unless you really need telemetry, which I must admit on any of the DM Racing ones, I've not got telemetry set up on any of them. I tend to just use that on the Flysky ones. But yeah, nice workaround, and you get to have the latest firmware, and you get to keep compatibility with your DM Racing receivers. So let's wrap this one up. So there you have it. Not an absolute 100% perfect fix, but you can bind it in one-way transmission. You still get all the functionality, it still drives, everything's as it should be. The only problem that you're going to lose is telemetry feedback to the controller. There's none of my vehicles that I've used any of the DM Racing ones in that would affect in any way. I don't use telemetry on them. You've still got your channels to use. Everything sort of functions as intended. The only time you'd have a problem with it is if you are relying on telemetry to come back. If you're doing that, you're better off with a Flysky receiver in there anyway. But hopefully that alleviates some of the problems that you're having with it. Again, I do perfectly understand why Flysky and other companies do this. They've spent a lot of money designing these things, and if other companies just come along and blatantly rip them off, plus you can't guarantee the safety and the functionality of it. But thanks again for watching Wtf Rc Cars. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share to friends and family, and catch you guys again in the next one.